Welcome back to She Can, where women lead by example. We lead with women's stories, their insights and experiences to support others because it's easier to be what you can see. If you like our conversations, please like and subscribe. And we're going to get to our newest story now. Welcome, Juliet Kinsman. I'm so excited to have you on She Can. You're a sustainable luxury expert. You're sharing stories to inspire and be impactful as a speaker, a broadcaster, a writer, and a consultant, mainly on sustainability. You're the sustainability editor at the Condé Nast Traveller mag. You're also the sustainable travel editor and podcast host at the Evening Standard. And you're the founder and content consultant and keynote speaker at BOUTECO. So tell us a little bit more about your journey, Juliet. You also wrote a book on travel and sustainability. Tell us a bit more about your story and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Stephanie. There is actually nowhere I would rather be than exactly right here, hopefully helping inspire others to share stories. And if I can share some insights and my experiences that help, it's honestly the greatest privilege. So thank you. I've been a professional storyteller in different capacities for 30 years. So whether it's a broadcaster, a writer, or as a consultant to luxury brands, it's always thinking like a journalist, which is sharing stories that you believe to be true and helpful. And I think journalism and the media, as we all know, for different reasons, we will sort of process this, but the media is in crisis. The business model for the media is broken. People aren't paying for journalism, which means that the models are very different. They rely on clicks, and when they rely on clicks in order to get minimal advertising these days, it means they have really sensationalist headlines, and we lose a lot of the nuance. So I urge everyone, I sometimes hear people say we're all journalists. I don't believe that to be quite the case, since journalism does require checks and balances, in editorial. And we do go through I hope, genuine journalist goes through a rigorous process, but we can certainly all think like journalists, which is being true to our audience. So that's absolutely what not only I'm passionate about, but I feel, the world needs. And I really think what I do and what I'm all about is really harnessing the exponential power of storytelling to demystify very complicated, maybe situations, certainly in sustainability and the climate, to help people understand them better and give them actionable advice, just so that they can really hear what you're saying and think, what can I do? So make it accessible and digestible. And I think in this world today, whether it's top level, whether it's corporate, whether it's politics at government level, whether it's just individuals in a shop, often we are guided by self-interest. And it's only, some may say it shouldn't be human nature, but it kind of is. And so all I ask people to do is pause for a moment and think about the we in everything, rather than just how does this suit me?
Juliet, and I love that because it couldn't be more aligned with She Can if you tried. So tell us a little bit more. We understand exactly what matters to you and how you want to matter in the world. Tell us a little bit more about that journey and how you understood that you're a good writer, that sustainability is the thing for you. You've done an incredibly impactful job in telling us the stories about eco-travel, traveling with a heart, how we can be a force for good as travelers, what a better capitalism means for you, and all of those things. So we're going to go into those things into more detail. But first, tell us a little bit about that journey where you realized, I am good at writing. I really enjoy that. And sustainability is where I want to make a difference.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. Well, I'm going to be honest and say it's not just writing, it's communicating. And I would say as a little only child in New York, who went to the United Nations school, so I had lots of international friends. I was always curious, and I always wanted to share stories. I wanted to hear more about where people were from, and I probably, I really wanted to share those stories myself. So since a very young age, what I understood to be journalism, I wanted to do that and be a journalist, absolutely. And I used to make little magazines for my family. So that started, at a young age. And then moving through, I went to university. I studied social anthropology. And my father at the time said, "Why are you studying that?" Because it was quite unusual back, it was in the 91 I went to university. And he said, "What's that? That's not helpful. You'll never get a job off that." Now, as we all know, social anthropology is very much understanding human culture, and it's the foundation for much of sustainability. So, being interested and curious about other cultures is incredibly important. And it gives us context. And it tackles myopia, because myopia is obviously when you have a very small lens on the world, it widens it. And we can't all have the privilege of traveling all over the world, and nor should we, because of the emissions from flying. So if we can still be curious from wherever we call home, it's a wonderful thing. So key moments in for me, well, actually I started as a music journalist. So I started writing mostly about nightclubs and DJs in the 90s, which was, yeah, it was a brilliant time.
Great
And I
fun
have
in
to
the
tell you,
90s.
so fun, because there were no smartphones, there was no social media. You could just go out and connect with people. You had subcultures where, these fantastic drag queens would dress up. I'm still friends. I saw my friend Miss Barbie last week. He's now Martin and works for the government, but still. And he used to dress up in these really flamboyant outfits. They didn't even take photographs of themselves. I mean, people wouldn't be able to imagine that now. Nothing was done for other people. It was done for yourself. It was done for your community. It was done for the fun and the personal expression. So you can imagine there's a real shift in mindset today. A lot that we do is performative and it's external, and that's sad. We should do things for the sort of inner reward. So I was part of the dance music scene, which was great. And I was one of the minority female journalists. So I know what it's like to be in a minority in that way. And I used to champion all the female DJs and music producers. Many were very talented. Many still will be thriving today. And, we would be stronger together sometimes, because it was a very masculine environment to work in. But anyway, moving on from the music side and watching the transition, if you look at the music scene and clubs and people socializing, and you look at the great hoteliers, I'm certainly not putting myself in the same category, but if you look at some of the greatest boutique hoteliers, Andre Balazs arguably created the first boutique hotel in the Mercer in New York, or maybe Ian Schrager, he created Paramount and many iconic boutique hotels. And so that transition from, we'd say, from dance floors to do not disturb signs. I was on holiday with my friend James in Ibiza when he met his wife to be Tamara, and they had an idea for a hotel guidebook. And they came to me and said, "Juliet, we need you to write this book. We need you to edit it." And that book became Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The idea was in 2002. By 2003, our first book had come out. I've actually edited and written many, many books. And in 2003, our first one came out. It outsold Harry Potter in the biggest bookshop in the UK, which is Waterstones by Piccadilly, which is central London. So it was a huge success. And we spoke about boutique hotels in particular, but we did it in a way that was, I hope, not only informed, but was entertaining. And we created a voice. Now, that's what I do, is I create a particular voice for brands that people want to hear. And since then, Mr. and Mrs. Smith has become the biggest boutique hotel expert in the world. It's transitioned to an OTA, we call it, online travel agency. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. But 2015, I was thinking, I don't really want to be selling hotel rooms. That's not what I'm about. I'm about telling stories. So I identified a certain genre or generation of positive impact, let's call it, led hotels, boutique eco hotels. And that inspired me to create my consultancy, BOUTECO, to celebrate those hotels, to help work with them, to get their stories heard. Most iconic hotel for me is Fogo Island Inn in Canada, and led by a woman called Zita Cobb. She's my mentor. She is absolutely my mentor and the reason for what I do. She's one of the most respected businesswomen in Canada, having retired in her 40s, the highest paid woman in Canada. But let me tell you, she was born to an illiterate mother and father in a tiny island called Fogo, the sixth of seven children, I think, the only girl, in a house with no running water. And she went on, well, she got TB. She was put in hospital on the main island for a year, aged 5 years old. And all she had was books. Now, she taught herself to read. She went to university. She studied economics. And she went on to work in, I think it's called wave multiplexing. I can't remember, like fiber optics. It's what gives us the internet. And it reminds us that that perseverance and that commitment to knowledge, whatever your background, you can still sometimes become the most successful person in the world. And she took all that wealth gained through those shares to create an economic engine for her tiny, tiny remote island in North America, where they had no economy because the fishing economy had collapsed due to sanctions, due to lack of fish. And she created this beautiful design hotel, which employed people in the local community, but more than anything, gave back dignity, repurposed and redeployed them, their skills. Boat builders became furniture makers, quilters became soft furnishing producers, craftspeople. And she showed us that, with a little imagination and approaching business in a different way, she could, through creativity, create a luxury travel destination. So I exist to share stories like that.
Beautiful, Juliet. Now tell us a little bit more about travel, sustainability, eco travel. What does it mean and how can we all do it?
Yeah, so the word eco, well, I don't know if you know this, a lot of people don't know. It was created by Ernst Haeckel. He was a zookeeper back in the late 19th century. Ecology, it's a German word, Ekologie. It's about, it's not just about people sort of disconnected from words. We use them so casually. The origin is, where we are, where we live, our environment. So if we look at that and we look at our sensitivity and caring for our environment in every way, eco, it's where we live. It's also the whole planet. If you were an astronaut and you went up to space and you looked back at this little planet Earth, you'd probably look at it and you'd think, wow, it's just one ecosystem and all of it's interconnected. And the way each one of us lives is reliant on each other. So I think what eco travel for me, people immediately think it's just about flying. And, I can talk about that all day long, but I don't want to squander this precious time to say, for me, it's really about wealth distribution. It's about getting money from those who have money in wealthier countries to those most vulnerable communities who need it to make them more climate resilient. And because without getting into a long lecture around colonialism, it's the extraction of resources and the profiting from that has become very, very imbalanced. So for me, eco travel is about resetting the balance. It's about opening our hearts and minds to other ways of being. It's we don't travel to other places because they're other worlds. When we travel, we're often reminded that we're all the same as human beings. Different landscapes, definitely. Certainly people in Scotland are going to tell you they go to Spain for a bit of sunshine and beaches. But really, I think it's the profound connection through travel is the reminder we're all the same. And I think when we have this rise, and I don't want to platform my own political views, but when we have this rise in right-wing politics in the world and hostility to immigration, honestly, my eyes will start welling up. The people who vote for that and the people who implement that would not do that if they could know and love and care for the people so desperate to leave their own homes in search of a better life. They would be much more welcoming. And as the climate emergency becomes more extreme, we're already becoming desensitized to extreme weather. What's in our news now? We're like, yeah, oh God, another flood. We're a bit blasé, but it's going to get worse. And it just, without getting, as I say, without getting into the whole geography lesson and the intersection with colonialism, I feel a great responsibility to help those who live in areas most affected by extreme weather everywhere.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, it's something. And these are stories help us make sense of these things. They make a sense of it on a human level, make sense of the complicated science and understand and process the physical geography behind it, the natural science behind it. Stories are wonderful. And that's why we're talking today.
And you're doing that so well, Juliet. So tell us a little bit, give us some top tips. If we are planning our year 2025, where should we be traveling and how should we be traveling?
So what I would say is, I mean, I'm so privileged to speak to presumably so many people in so many different places with so many different hopes and goals for their travels. You have to ask, I'm not here to make people feel guilty. I'm here to inspire people to think, how can my travel decision be helpful to either invest in somewhere, a business or a destination that it can help boost biodiversity and protect nature. That's a number one priority in the world. Or it can funnel money into a community that needs it for lots of ripple effect reasons. So I would say my top tip is think about who you're giving your money to. So first of all, you think, where do you want to go in the world, right? Do they deserve, does that destination and does that community deserve your money?
Mm.
Then think, who am I, right? And then you book it, the hotel and where you stay and where you eat. So I'll give you an example. Today I'm booking my bucket list trip with a bunch of friends. I'm booking Socotra, was it an island off Yemen? It's a Yemen island in Yemen, the country. And I feel, first of all, devastated by what's going on there. And they need money coming into their economy. It's very, very rich in biodiversity, and the people on Yemen, and it's perfectly safe. The people on, sorry, Socotra, are very different. They live a very different life, and I can't wait for that cultural exchange. Them benefiting from us being there, us being there with them. In our particular case, I'm booking it through an incredible organization called Ishkar, which specifically works to support people in war-torn regions. Um, and they work with artisans, whether it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan. So I know that's a good business. Then we have luxury mobile tents. So I know that the physical footprint, the carbon footprint of where I'm going is light. I'm not booking an international resort where essentially I'm paying money. Let's say this hotel's owned by someone who lives in Saudi, managed by a company that's registered in the United States, right? All of what I'm doing is going there to Socotra. And we're also spending time with ethnobotanists, learning about the biodiversity and why we need to look after nature. So I hope that's an example. I mean, the best thing you can do is spend local, uh, find social enterprises that support local causes, really learn a few words in that local language, connect in a meaningful way, whether it's Romania, whether it's Indonesia. If you're going to Indonesia, stay away from all the overpopulated areas, go to the more remote areas. Whether it's, a country that really suffered during the pandemic. So I went to Ecuador earlier this year, devastated. And as a result of that, you're seeing all these problems with the drug cartels. They don't produce drugs in Ecuador. It's because the neighboring countries that do, Bolivia, Colombia, saw an opportunity to traffic the drugs through their more vulnerable borders because they had less money coming in because of the pandemic. So economic sustainability, always think about who you're giving your money to. That would be what I say. Of course, we should all fly less. And when we do fly, if you fly economy, you'll be happy to know it's much less unsustainable because your carbon footprint in economy class is going to be much smaller. Make the most of those trips, go away for longer. We need to avoid those quick little weekend hops here and there and really, look at the airline and look at what they're doing around research and development into sustainable aviation fuel, although I don't think that can be scaled and I think it's a distraction, but eventually, hopefully, hydrogen they will sort out a little bit better. But take the train when you can, uh, fly less, make the most of those trips, and just really travel in the truest sense and support particularly businesses run by women. You can find some. I'm about to do a little piece for Condé Nast Traveller on all the women's museums all over the world. So that's a great thing to do, is
Yeah.
build that into your itinerary.
Juliet, I think the best
Thank
thing
you.
we can do is point out that you have a massive library of beautiful, soulful, heartful places around the world where people need to go to. And they should go and read the articles you've written, because you have an enormous amount of beautifully written and researched content on your website, Juliet Kinsman. And so I think people should go and read up to really travel better, more respectfully, to build a better world, to help people to really make an impact when you travel. And we're very thankful for your tips on that. Now, Juliet, I'm wondering, if you look back at your life, what do you feel are the main takeaways for you from, all the content you create and have created? What are your biggest learnings, do you think?
Thank you, Stephanie. That's a great, my learnings. So I'm going to picture you who's watching. Thank you. If I can pass on my knowledge after 30 years, things I wish I'd known. Well, I didn't necessarily have great mentors. I worked for a lot of men also in my 20s. Find really strong, inspiring women. I wish I'd had that. I have had that later in my career. Um, I'm going to be really honest with you. I had a lot of sadness. My mother died when I was young, and I had a lot of processed grief. And when you don't deal with that trauma in your life, it comes out sideways and it comes out spiky. So I was probably a little bit difficult in my 20s. And if I could be a kinder friend to myself, I'd say learn to not react in situations emotionally. Just take a moment, and don't take things personally. Learn from your mistakes. When people give feedback, welcome it. Be grateful for the learnings. Be gracious. And just think about every situation as an exchange of energy. And I wish, in the past, women aren't really allowed to get angry. And sometimes we need anger. Sometimes we need that dragon energy, I call it. But generally, people respond better with when they've got inspiring positive energy. So take a moment, think, how do you want to be heard? How do you want to be received? Um, Always be respectful. Always be respectful. Up, down, side, whoever you're talking to, always be respectful. It's the same as parenting, to be honest. I'm a mum of a teenager, so it's a very, this is why I'm sort of sad, if you don't mind me saying, about Trump, because he doesn't model a respectful person, and that for me is the strongest quality in the world. Um, always, always be grateful, show gratitude. I wouldn't usually want to give an example of something negative, but I had a person who worked for me. And I thought she was great. I always try and, most people who work for me will say I generally try and lift you up, encourage you, share all my knowledge, generous. But what I observed was, she was a good 10 years behind me in the career experience or ladder. And she never said thank you to me. And she would sort of take all my contacts and my learnings, and she would never give back, and she would emulate what I do. And they say imitation is flattery, which is true to an extent, but it made me sad. If she had just said just once, thank you, Juliet. Thank you for sharing, letting me learn, I would have showered her with even more. So my advice to you is always be grateful, always be generous, always be collaborative, always be appreciative, and always lift each other up, particularly women. It is so, so important we have each other's backs, and be kind, and think if someone's having a moment where they're emotional, because we're not really meant to show our emotions in the workplace. That was always my challenge, and a very passionate person, is think there might be something else going on. Be kind and help people out, and just think, how can I get the best out of them? But this opportunity is wonderful. I'm so glad I can speak from the heart. Thank you. And thank you to everyone in my world who's given me so many opportunities. And, I'm so grateful. There's incredible people in our world, 8 billion, you know.
Yeah.
So
And
find
we
those who
are
inspire you.
so much more united than we are divided. And I'm so excited that you talked about the sacred pause, right? Which we should all practice more, about talking about integrity, which is something we have to look at and repurpose for ourselves, and not just personally, but also universally. Juliet, so what do you feel are the top qualities that you have that really serve you every day throughout your journey?
Oh, wow, thank you. Empathy, compassion, not everyone, many of us who've experienced different challenges in our childhoods, we have to be at least, I don't mean to, I'm trying to be positive and say, look, I feel at least it's given me compassion and I'm grateful for that. Um, what would I say? I'm a communicator, I'm a clear communicator, but a vital part of communication is listening.
Yeah.
So it's not just being on send, it's receiving information, being curious, listening to everyone. And actually, I read something the other day. I wonder, we hear about active listening, so it's showing that we're really taking on board what people are saying. But actually, not even, it doesn't even need to be active. Just listen to people.
Yeah. And listen to people, and then take the sacred pause potentially and respond gracefully. I think we feel we're in a world where we're so polarized that we just don't listen to each other anymore. We cancel each other out in the first couple of seconds, and we've lost the art of communication, which is we don't have to agree. We can agree to disagree. We can do it gracefully, and that will build bridges. And Juliet, you are a bridge builder. You're a connector, and that's very important in this day and age, and we have to therefore tell our stories, because you're building bridges to not only yourself but other people, and a whole industry, that's the travel industry, a whole industry that is sustainability, and all these topics that are so vitally important for our young people to get excited about, because we come out with so much negative media and press every day, that we need to turn this around. We need to have the incredible people who paint this picture beautifully, because we do want to travel. Just how can we do it better? How can we do each of the things in our lives better to have the we, as you said earlier, standing out? Juliet, so I'm wondering, what do you feel is the most challenging part of your sort of career or life in general?
Thank you, Stephanie. This is honestly, it's such a wonderful privilege to do this. So thank you. Well, I would have to say the most challenging part is reconciling my own values and ideals with reality, which is the world is driven by profit. We have to understand that. It is a patriarchy. It is a world run by men. It is men that hold the power. It's men in charge of the budgets, and they think differently, um, often to women. We have a flurry of examples, I'm sure. So I just have to reconcile that with what can I do within that system? And we often say, because of capitalism, oh goodness, the system is broken. Well, to quote one of my favorite writers, I would urge everyone to read his work. He's quite radical, an environmentalist, George Monbiot, but he will say to you, capitalism isn't broken. It's working exactly how it's intended to work.
Yeah.
It is intended to work in a way, and as part of neoliberalism. And if you look at all of this, it serves corporations, it serves businesses, and it serves the people with the most money at the top. And so, how do we work within that? Um, we have to accept that for me, well, I learned something called the transformational triangle the other day. I love it. So you've got for-profit businesses, you've got governments, you've got the public sector, you've got private, public, and you've got non-profits, charities.
Yeah.
All three of those need to work together.
Yeah.
And I find myself sort of dancing between that, because the reality is, um, the economic growth is what most people measure their success by.
Definitely.
And so how do we just encourage a way that those in charge and those measuring success and setting targets also realize true cost accountancy, and they also understand that not everything is financial, and the nuances of around making a business profitable. It's also about investing in the human beings and businesses. So we all have a role in that. And in fact, I really believe, you know, a lot of the younger people rising up understand that better and will bring that into play. So I really have a lot of hope and optimism for an awakening in the business world.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And you lead with your story, Juliet, and we all lead with our stories. And if we do that in intentional ways, I think we can make a huge difference. And you do that with every story you put out there or you broadcast in whichever medium you're using. So, what do you think you're most proud of?
Oh, thank you. Well, so from a work point of view, I remember the day when I was actually doing freelance shifts at OK magazine, the celebrity magazine, and running down the stairs to get my first copy of Mr. and Mrs. Smith that had been the product of a year of blood, sweat, and tears. So exciting. We'd created this hotel guidebook. We did things like style, setting, favorite. We came up with that. No one did that before. Now it's an industry norm, it's a standard. But so much love went into creating that book. It was a game changer. But of course, as a mother, I would have to say, with any project that we put our heart and soul into, my daughter is a teenager, and seeing that she has great values and a social conscience, that probably for me, honestly, that is my proudest achievement. Just turning the light on for anyone, whether it's my daughter, whether it's people in an audience in Croatia or Malaysia. Just my proudest moments are always getting people just to think that little bit differently and caring a little bit more.
Yeah. Juliet, and you definitely influenced me doing exactly that. So what plans do you have? How are the next years going to look? Do you have a big project? Are you going to continue the way you are right now, which is already making a big change?
Thank you. I'll be very honest again. So, as successful as I may look outwardly, and certainly through Instagram and social media, I've traveled a lot this year and I've had a lot of wonderful engagements, but it's also been very difficult for me professionally in some ways because the media is collapsing. 80% of my colleagues at the Evening Standard were made redundant. So I'm not sure of the future. Particularly, I'm very proud of the Standard, its new iteration as a weekly format. So that's hard. And Condé Nast Traveller, certainly it's I don't have the same amount of work from that I used to. The media is shifting. I think we're in a sustainability recession, which means I think people aren't clicking on sustainability articles. I think my articles don't traffic that well, as we say. So it's quite hard. I would encourage, thank you, everyone. I'm very excited for 2025. I'm putting my energy into using my journalism skills and my editorial to share my stories in different ways rather than traditional media. Let's put it that way. I'm doing a great new podcast series for someone. I'm working with the Datai Langkawi Hotel in Malaysia, absolutely committed to sustainability through nature and through many community initiatives. So I'm working with them to think of how we can share more solutions-led storytelling, I call it. And yeah, but it's hard. It's hard being a journalist. Like I won't be able to survive as a journalist for much longer, if I'm honest with you. But I will find other ways, other outlets. Please do engage with me on Instagram. That's somewhere I like to share my stories about things that matter.
Yeah, and look up Juliet and BOUTECO because you do an amazing job, Juliet. And I understand the challenges of the industry you're in. And I think a lot of people find themselves having to rethink going into the Substack world, more the podcast world, and trying to get stories out in a different way. And But I'm thankful for you for being honest and authentic and being such a role model and mentor, because actually there is a real issue with the media industry and we don't want its collapse, because then we really don't know anymore where any information is coming from. And that's a real challenge. And so I am so grateful to talk to anybody making a difference here. And by telling your story authentically, you're doing exactly that. Juliet, so what do you want people to take away from your story? Ideally.
I think always be curious. Um, Always ask more questions about everything, about, think about sustainability is a kind of meaningless, overused word at this stage. So let's just think about impact. Is it positive or is it negative? Think of it as a profit and loss system for good and bad in the world, whether it's for nature or whether it's for people. So every time you make a decision, think, how is this benefiting those, who need help? Because let's remember that capitalism, as I said, is designed to help money float upwards, right? We need it to float downwards and stay in local communities. So every time you make a decision, a purchasing decision, anything, every time you tell a story, how is this having a positive effect or helping people's awareness around something that matters in the world? How is it uplifting them? How is it empowering them to make better decisions? So how are you being helpful? How are you telling helpful stories?
Yeah.
Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for having me.
Juliet, I'm so excited for your story. I'm so excited to listen to you for being such a thinker and a disruptor, a role model and a mentor, and for really trying to do the right thing, which we should place a lot more emphasis on.
Thank you.